So Joy Hawkins is the owner of Sterling Sky, a local search agency. She is also the owner of Local U and the owner of Local Search Forum. I commonly refer to her as the queen of local SEO, which she's very humble, but trust me, y'all, she is the queen of local SEO. And with that, let's give her a big round of applause and hand it off to her.
Thank you, appreciate it. So I'll start by telling you guys a story. My sister had one of those wonderful homeowner moments earlier this year where her basement started flooding. She had a pipe burst, and it's one of those like panic, scenarios that you don't want to face. So of course she, pulls out her phone, needs to find a plumber right away, searches on Google and calls this plumber that she found. She thought they were a great company because when you look on Google, you see that they have a pretty decent rating. Facebook says the same thing. Their reviews are pretty good there. So she's telling me, I'm like, oh, who did you hire? And she's like, oh, and she names off the name of the plumber. And I was like, oh, those guys. Like, fun fact, I've been tracking those guys for like a couple years. They're definitely buying all the reviews. And she's like, what? I'm like, oh, they're a horrible company. They're actually on a list that we have in Canada. The government actually comes out with a consumer watch list, says basically don't work with this company because they scam people, and they're on it. But yet Google shows them as this wonderful company. Funny that when you start getting off Google and Facebook and you go to the lesser popular sites, there's one called Home Stars that's for home business services, and they have a horrible rating there. They had a horrible rating on this other site. Yelp, of course, is the worst like usual. So you get the truth on Yelp at least, but the BBB also had them as a fail, a 1-star review. And how I knew as well that they were, buying reviews is by scanning them using the Transparency Company. If you're not familiar with them, I believe they're sponsoring this event, so they're on your bags that you're carrying around. But this is a kind of cool tool because it'll actually tell you in an automated way so that you don't have to check every review if the reviews are suspicious. And these guys failed bad. So I was able to warn my sister, and fortunately, she'd only given like a small deposit. So I think I saved her some money by not utilizing these guys. But it's a big problem, especially if you work with small businesses. Fake reviews are not something that is dying or going away by any means. And one of the problems that we run into is people like to vilify businesses that buy reviews, but I find all the time that it's not like just terrible businesses that buy reviews. There's a lot of like people that have good intentions and they feel like they have no other choice, or they're kind of in panic mode. So there's been some studies done on this, and this one in particular that looked at restaurants found that basically restaurant owners are likely to commit review fraud if they've had like a recent negative review. It's like the instant thing that comes in their head, like, oh no, what do? I got to call like all my friends and my mom and get them to leave reviews because I got this one negative, right? It's just like the instinct. And it's becoming more of a problem because we're seeing a trend that negative reviews are actually growing over time. So I love looking at the report that Yelp puts out every year because Google doesn't do one. But Yelp puts out a report every year that says like what percentage of reviews on their site are what star. So I kind of graphed it out. They don't really make this easy to find, but I looked back using the Wayback Machine on some of their previous years because they erase the data every year. And I was just curious to see like what the trend was. And as you can kind of see with these graphs, 5-star reviews are going up and then they kind of hit a peak there. The middle is dying, like 2, 3, 4-star reviews. Those are not as common as they used to be 5 years ago. And you'll see the continued growth of 1-star reviews. So this is a little terrifying if you're a business owner or you work with small businesses. Because if you're, legitimately trying to do things the right way, obviously I don't condone buying reviews. How do you compete with this? So I kind of wanted to look at 2 different things during this presentation. So I'll break it into 2 different segments. First, I wanted to look at reviews and like what impact do they have on ranking? Because I'm an SEO, I'm obsessed with figuring out what impacts ranking. So that's like kind of my day job. And I also wanted to know, like, if you're a business that's really just trying to control what consumers see on Google, is there any way to control that? Can you actually influence which reviews Google shows first on the list? So we're going to dive into those 2 things. But to start with the fun stuff, the ranking stuff, I want to know, if you have a review that mentions certain words like keywords, does the text of that review help you actually rank for that thing? So, for example, when you look on Google, it's easy to conclude that, oh yeah, that makes a difference. It helps you rank because there's these little snippets that Google will often pull out. So if like you search for a dentist, for example, Google will try and like pull out like the words emergency or dentist out of the actual review text and show it right in the search results. So a lot of people look at this and say like, okay, obviously that means that that review is what's helping that business rank. But we all know that, correlation's not always causation. So I really wanted to try and get to the bottom of it. Now, what I'm going to show you guys, don't try this. Actually, it's funny. After I did this test, Google actually warned us on one of the calls that I had with them, like, guys, don't use your own accounts for testing. Like, it's not a good idea. So don't do what I did. But we wanted to figure out if reviews actually, like the text of the review mattered. So we picked I thought a really good candidate. I was like, what industry would have no SEO efforts? So we went with a farm, a Christmas tree farm. We did the test in the middle of summer when they weren't even really doing any business. And when I made sure we picked a business that was like in the middle of nowhere, they had no website, or their website had like really awful stuff on it, like nothing had been done. It was clear that they had no optimization efforts. So anything that we would do would help the ranking ideally. So myself and my colleagues decided to leave reviews on them. Again, like, don't go tweeting, oh, Joy leaves negative or fake reviews. These were all positive reviews. So if anything, we were helping them. But we did write reviews for this tree farm, and we kind of spread them out to try and make them look more natural. My favorite was from my colleague Brian, was talking about how they have baller trees. I loved this. I didn't tell them what to write. I just said, make sure it includes this word and that word. Now, funny thing, if you monitor like reviews for clients at all, you'll probably notice that Google has been getting stricter with what reviews they let publish. So they've been taking down reviews like crazy as of this year. They've been filtering reviews, like they don't even get live at all. And, I have to say, actually, they're doing something right, because one of my colleague, Colin, his review no longer shows up. So Google was able to connect the dots that like, hey, you haven't actually visited this tree farm in New York. And they removed mine as well. So good on Google, because these aren't actually genuine experiences whatsoever. So after leaving these reviews with these like specific keywords, and then we went to see if, rankings had increased for those keywords. So 2 different keywords. I know the wording's a little blurry, but like the top one, the left was before, the right is after. Left one's before and the right's after, 2 different words. And if anything, rankings actually went down. So there was no visible increase as a result of us leaving these reviews. I do realize that we left a small number, but given the business, they didn't have a lot to begin with. So it was a noticeable difference. So if you're in the camp that's like trying to coach people on what to put in their reviews and like trying to get, clients to write certain things, the good news is you don't need to do that. It doesn't seem to make much of a difference. The next thing I wanted to look at was around review velocity. So we're talking about numbers of reviews. I'm sure if you talk to business owners, you'll often hear things like, I have more reviews than my competitors. Why do I not outrank them? And I get that a lot. So I wanted to know, like, does the number even matter? We had a perfect test candidate for this. There was an insurance agent that I work with, and he had a couple different listings. One we never touched. We just like left it alone. And I said, probably should do something with this listing. It's not your priority, but you kind of have a bad average because you've only got 3 reviews and your average is 3.7. Maybe we should actually like get a few more reviews to that listing and kind of work on lifting your average. So I had him do that. I had him switch out. He uses a software to gather reviews. And I said, can you just like start asking customers to review this listing instead of your other one? He did that. And it was interesting. What we noticed is that for the first little bit, we saw an obvious increase. Looking from the left to the middle there, rankings had a clear increase after he got to 16 reviews. But then when he went from 16 to 31, it didn't increase at all. What I think is interesting about this is it actually matches up something that Mike Blumenthal, if you don't know him, he was like my mentor getting into this industry. They published something like years and years and years ago talking about how if you get 10 reviews, there's a ranking boost. And I was kind of chatting with him and saying, like, do you think that's still true? Like, it kind of looks like it is. We've actually repeated this a few times now and found that if you're looking for a magic number, 10 appears to be the magic number. So we encourage all of our clients to get at least 10 reviews. But as you can see here, it's not one of those things where like the more reviews you have, the better you rank. There is this thing like the law of diminishing returns. Like if you do the same thing over and over again, you're not always going to see the same level of results. I also reached out to Joel Headley, who's another guy that I just have a lot of respect for because he worked at Google for over a decade. So he knows things that we don't know. And one of the things he noticed while working at an agency was that they didn't just see an increase in rankings, but they also saw an increase in leads around the 10 mark. So that is definitely a number to kind of aim to hit when talking about numbers of reviews. That being said, keep in mind, like, although there is a correlation there, it is not the only ranking factor. This is an example of a law firm that we did an audit for earlier this year. So again, like, it's kind of hard to read, but the blue is reviews, the number of reviews they had, and the red is the number of rankings that they have, or top 3 rankings in the local pack. And like, you can see their competitors, there's this trend line, and then there's them. They have like the most reviews by a long shot, the worst rankings. So we see cases like this. There is something else going on in this scenario, but there's a lot of other things that factor into ranking, and it is not as simple as if you have the most reviews. So especially if you work with industries that have like department listings, practitioner listings, things like that, a lot of those industries tend to like create these listings that are just blank and they have nothing on them. So definitely aim to get at least 10 reviews if you work with businesses in that scenario. Then I also wanted to just look at review recency, because numbers are important, whatever, but what if you're a business that hasn't had any reviews in the last 6 months, or you were doing really good and then kind of flatlined? We had another really good case for this. This was a client of ours, and I noticed this is a tool called the GMB Everywhere tool, and I can't remember if it's paid or free, but I think you can run a couple scans for free before they charge you. So you can do this like run on it. It gives you a graph. It'll actually tell you your number of reviews and rating over time. So you can see that they were doing really well. Like, review numbers were going up and up and up. And then all of a sudden it like stops and it's like not growing anymore. So I reached out to the client and I was like, hey, Brent, like, can you tell me what's going on here? Like, are you guys not asking for reviews anymore? Or like, why aren't they coming in? He's like, oh, I can tell you exactly why they're not coming in. He's like, I stopped bribing my staff. And I was like, oh, do tell. So he told me basically what he used to do is he used to, if his staff got in a review, like they asked and the customer left one, he'd put their name into a drawing. And then at the end of the week, he would do like a quick little lottery, and you could win like $5 or $50 or $100. So it didn't actually cost him a lot of money because, you know, it's a lottery, but obviously made a huge impact. Now, if you're wondering, like, is that okay to like bribe staff? I'm not a lawyer, so don't quote me on this, but like, as far as I know, there isn't a legal issue for most industries with incentivizing staff. Absolutely not okay to incentivize customers. So if you're going to do incentives, you want to do it with the employees, not the clients. Incentivizing clients is not only an FTC guide violation, but it's also one of Google's rules. Like, you're not allowed to offer incentives, and if they catch you doing it, they'll remove your reviews. So my suggestion to Brent was like, you should probably go back to like bribing your staff. It appears that that was working pretty well for you. Now, what we saw with his rankings, which was kind of interesting, is when the reviews kind of stopped coming in, the next major algorithm update that we saw happen, he took a hit, like quite a bit, especially on the local side. So you can kind of see here, this grid is very red. That red is not a color we want to see. We want to see green. And then as he started getting more new reviews again, things started to go up. And to kind of map out the timeline, it was kind of interesting because like we noticed that the trends happen first, and then there'd be an algorithm update and things would correct. So as he starts getting new reviews, it's nothing really going on until the next algorithm update, and then we would see his rankings increase. So it's kind of interesting to see that there seems to be kind of a correlation there between algorithm updates and the frequency of reviews. And we saw this with other clients as well. If they had like a good number, but they had no new reviews whatsoever in the last like 6 to 8 months, a lot of them also kind of saw hits on local rankings when big core updates would happen. So to-do list here would be to incentivize staff, not customers. And that seems to be like a really good way to make sure that you're kind of continually getting in new reviews. So getting into the part about controlling, so this is more like reputation management. You know, I was really curious to know how Google picks which reviews to float on top. So I'll give you an example here. Let's say that you work for the New Jersey DMV department, one of them. So I think this one's in Jersey City. So let's say you work there and all your reviews are negative because nobody likes the DMV and nobody likes New Jersey. So let's say you're working there and all of a sudden you get this positive review. You can't read it. It's really funny. But like basically this person's like, I had an awesome experience here. If you want to show up and not have a line, show up at 4 a.m. So like apparently that's the only way to get good service at the DMV in Jersey City. But let's say I work there and I'm like, I want this review to stay at the top. Is there a way to do that? Like, is there a way to actually influence which ones Google sticks up there? So you might be thinking like, okay, these are sorted by how recently they were left. So, you know, often when you go on to a listing with lots of reviews, it's true. The more recent reviews do tend to be more likely at the top than older reviews. But you'll often see cases like this, where this is like a cookie company that I love out in California. And they have this like old review, I think it's like from 10 months ago, that's stuck to the top. Even though they have tons of new reviews coming in, this 10-month-old review is just stuck there and it's negative. And it's like, nobody wants that. If this is your business, you don't want a negative review sticking to the top. We see this a lot. Like I see this with clients, I see it with people in the forums all the time. So that's what I'm trying to see is like, can you do anything about that? So we did this study. I basically monitored a few businesses. In one case, the lawn care business, I monitored for over a year. I literally would look every month. I'd go on every couple weeks and I would check to see what reviews were there. I would document them. I documented things about the reviews, different patterns. And then about halfway into the year, I decided I wanted to look at some other industries as well to see if they had the same patterns I was seeing with the lawn care business. So I added in a few others. The stuff that I discovered was not at all what I was expecting. Like I had expectations going into this that I thought I knew, which turns out I was wrong, which happens a lot. It's why I always suggest if you do SEO, you need to test things and not just rely on what you think might happen. So one of the first things that I was looking at was just like the rating of the review. So I had this theory, like put on your tinfoil hat. It was like maybe Google wants diversity. So like they're more likely to keep that 1 star up there because they think, oh, we don't want all 5 stars. We want to have like a mix of reviews. And that was my thought, because it did seem like the 1-star reviews would stay live longer. So like the graph here is showing how long the review stayed in the top 10. And you'll see like, yeah, the 1 and the 4 stars did stay up longer than like the 5 stars. So I was like, maybe it's a diversity thing. But then I started digging into it and realized that it's not actually that simple. The thing that I believe that causes 1-star reviews to actually get pinned to the top more often has nothing to do with the diversity theory, but has to do with word count. So when we looked at word count versus how many days the review stayed up, there was a huge correlation. Like the longer the review, the longer it stayed up. And it was like a clear trend line. You can kind of see I was trying to make the trend line there in red, but it was very clear and very consistent amongst all the different businesses that we looked at. And you can kind of see here, this is the problem. Longer reviews tend to be negative. So when you look at the 1-star reviews, the average word count was 244 versus 5-star was 74. I mean, like, if you know people, this shouldn't be shocking. Like, people like to bitch about stuff online. So, like, if this is the case, this is a hard thing to kind of combat, because you know that your customers aren't as likely to write super lengthy reviews if they're positive. So if you're going to encourage customers to do anything above and beyond just writing a review, this would be one thing to ask them, like, hey, try make your review long, because that's going to help us. If you want to help us, if you love us, keep your review longer. And Yelp already kind of tries to fit this in. Like if you leave reviews on Yelp, they're always telling me my reviews are too short. But this is why they obviously value, Google as well values longer reviews. I also wanted to look at these things. I don't know what to call these. They don't really have a name. But when you go to leave a review in certain industries, Google asks you these additional questions. So I kind of split them into two. The first one, they ask you, like, what do you like about this business or not about this business? So we call these like the positive and negative attributes. So if you leave a positive one, this is what it looks like. It shows up along with your review. And then if you leave the critical ones, it shows up like this, like, no, they were terrible at their quality. These didn't make any difference, really. We didn't see a huge correlation either way on how long the review stayed up. If anything, the reviews without these actually stayed up longer. So encouraging people to fill these in doesn't seem to matter too much. Then we looked at the same thing, but like services. So again, if you say you use the business, sometimes there's just an additional thing that'll pop up and it'll say, which services did you use? Only for certain industries. And unfortunately, these are automated. If you're wondering if you can control what shows up there, they are based on your business categories. So you have no control. Even if there's like something there and you're like, I don't do that, it's based on the category. So these show up similarly. They show up like, you see the positive above and then services down below. And we found the same thing with these. They really didn't make much of a difference whatsoever. If anything, the reviews without them actually stayed up longer. So these are not something that you'll need to like encourage people to fill in if they're available in your industry. Also wanted to look at local guides. Over my career, I've actually had a habit of like getting really annoyed at people that talk about local guides and how important it is. And like, it seems to be one of those things that's like very misunderstood. So I definitely wanted to look at this with a local guide. Like, it's pretty simple. If they are a local guide, it says local guide. And then if they're not a local guide, it doesn't. So it's pretty simple. And this is not at all what I was expecting to see. Like, I really thought being a local guide made zero difference whatsoever. Appears like it does actually make a difference. So what we saw here, as you can see with the numbers, like if they were a local guide, the number of days that the review stayed up way longer than the number of reviews for people that were not local guides. And unfortunately, it was consistent in every industry that I looked at. So this was surprising, again, not what I was expecting to see, but it does appear that Google has some faith in the local guides program for some reason. So it's simple, like if your customers are willing to do an extra step other than write a review, making sure that they join the local guides program, which is literally the click of a button. It's free, it doesn't take much time. That will help all of the reviews, not just yours, all of the reviews kind of have more importance on Google, so worth doing. We also looked at, how filled out their profile photo was, like maybe if you give more information to Google about yourself, Google will trust you more. So we wanted to see if that made any difference. So here was kind of a little bit mixed. So not as clear as some of the others, but it did seem like overall with all the different business types that having a profile photo was better than not having one. So it'd be good to have on your profile if you're leaving a business a review and you have a profile photo. Again, Google's just more likely to show that review longer. We were also wondering, like, okay, well, maybe if the person's like super active, like Yelp has their elite reviewers and they really try and highlight those because those people just review businesses all the time. I wasn't sure how Google's stance on this was. I love this review because it's a negative review for the national Christmas tree in Washington, D.C. And this guy's apparently pissed off that the tree's not up in June or July, whatever date he went. And yeah, it's like the negative reviews you see online are crazy. So, maybe if you want, and his name's Big Sexy, so he's clearly credible. So this one we did not see a pattern with at all. Like, it was all over the place. There was no clear correlation whatsoever. And we looked as well at, like, if they left photos, same deal. Like, you can leave photos on businesses. So we wanted to see that. It was like another choppy, no correlation graph. So the good news is, like, you don't have to worry if your clients are not spending tons of time reviewing other businesses. That doesn't appear to be too much of a factor here. This is another one that I have looked at a lot. I get questions about this a lot, but upvotes, like we see so many comments and questions about this in the forum. Is upvoting your review going to help? And again, I had come into this with my own theories and ideas, and I was wrong. So I did not think upvotes were going to matter at all, but they did. So clear correlation here. The number of upvotes versus how many days that review stayed up in the top 10. Now, I wrote a blog 2 years ago talking about how upvoting did not actually change the order of the reviews, which is still true for the record. If you're trying to make one review move up above another review, you won't achieve that by going and upvoting all the reviews that are below it. So that's what we were kind of experimenting with when I posted this article saying it makes no difference. What we are measuring here is different. We're not talking about can we move the order? We're talking if it's already there, can I make it stay there for a lot longer? And that's where upvotes seem to matter. So encouraging customers to upvote other reviews that they find helpful. I wouldn't tell them which ones, hey, can you upvote that one and that one and that one? But if you're asking them to leave a review, you could ask them to upvote any others that they find useful. And I left this one to near the end because this one, although I was surprised by a lot of things, I'm always surprised when I'm testing things. This one blew my mind. I remember messaging my colleagues and I was like, this can't actually be happening. And then we repeated it and it's just crazy. So I'll share what we found. Photos and reviews were something that I noticed as a trend was definitely correlating with the reviews that were staying up and correlating a lot. So photos in reviews are huge. Nobody asks for them. People just ask for reviews. They don't seem to ask customers for photos. I feel like this is probably the biggest thing if you're writing notes to start doing. But this was a huge correlation. I looked at the jeweler on purpose because the jeweler had so many photos. People are posting pictures of their engagement rings. And it was a massive difference. If they got a review that didn't have a photo, it was not up there very long. If they got a review with a photo, it stayed live for quite a while. So as a marketer, I'm thinking, how can we leverage this? Okay. So I had this experiment idea and I said, I'm gonna reach out to one of my clients who left us a review years ago. So this guy was a client of ours, left us a review, I think a year and a half, 2 years ago. We use GatherUp for all our reviews. And So I was like, I'm going to try this. So I reached out to this client of ours, Billy. I said, Billy, can you just do something for me? Go to your review that you left for Sterling Sky a couple years ago. Don't edit it. Don't change anything about the review. Just add a photo. And I actually sent him a photo to use because like, what photo are you going to put on a marketing company? Like, so I was like, here's a photo of my team. Can you just use this one? And he was like, sure, I'd be happy to experiment. What we actually found after he did that, the entire order of our reviews changed. So his 1.5-year-old review all of a sudden now was third on the list, bumped way up. But not only that, it bumped up a whole bunch of other old reviews along with it. And we did this because it was funny. We had a negative review at the top before, the only negative review we've ever got. And it was a guy that was complaining that we didn't answer our phones one day. And frankly, he was right. We had actually an issue with our phone system, but he wasn't even a customer. Like, never hired us, never gave us a dime. We never actually did SEO for him. So it wasn't really like, you know, as a business owner, it's not really what I want people to see because it's not a reflection of our actual like service. So I was just curious to see what happened. I didn't actually expect that to go away. Expected it to like get pushed down a bit, but it like got pushed down so far it's not even in the top 10 anymore, which is not, again, what I was expecting to happen. So we were like, okay, let's try this again. So we have this client, and it was kind of funny. He got a negative review, and you can literally see the trend. He got a negative review the same day. He gets like 5 positives. And I'm like, that guy literally emailed all his friends, like no doubt. So it didn't work because the negative review is still stuck at the top, and then all the recent ones were below it. So I said, okay, I'm like, Rick, can you email a couple of your old clients, ask them to add a photo to their old review? What happened? Same thing as ours. The old review all of a sudden is now popping up higher, pushing the 1-star down. It wasn't as dramatic as ours where it like pushed it off the top 10, but it did push it down. And basically, I've had other people tell me that this has worked as well for them. So we've repeated this a few times. We tried it with a business that has a bit of a reputation problem. So these guys are like not doing so well. They got lots of negative reviews. We have a few clients like this. It's not really impactful when you do it for ones like this. Like, it kind of worked, but it kind of didn't. Like, if you get rid of one 1-star review and then you've got 3 more, like, it's probably not even worth doing. So I would say if you have a business that like has a really stellar reputation, this is a really solid tip to get that review pushed down. Basically, you want to ask, first of all, you want to ask, you know, customers that are happy to leave photos with the reviews. But the tip that really like I wasn't expecting to get out of this, if you have a negative review, if you have that scenario happen, just email a couple of your old customers that have already reviewed you and see if they can add a photo. And then all of a sudden you'll notice the order change. So that works really well. I'm not going to lie. I was like debating even publishing this because I was like, this is kind of good to know. I'm like, do I want to share this? Like, I don't know. I'm like, well, all the fake review. Well, I was like, maybe all the fake review providers are just going to take this and be like, great, we're just going to like post all kinds of photos with our fake reviews now. But yeah, obviously decided to share it. yeah. Don't push it out there. Then we also lastly just wanted to look at click-through rate, because click-through rate is something I've been like obsessed with on the search side. And I can tell you like click-through rate is absolutely a ranking factor despite what Google says. So I wanted to see if it mattered as far as reviews go. So we did this test where basically I had a bunch of people click on the 11th review. I said, go down, find the 11th review on here, click the more button, and then let's see what happens. We had 135 people do this, so quite a few over 3 months. It made no difference. It didn't change the order of the review. It didn't make that review move up in any way. So when it comes to click-through manipulation, it does definitely work when it comes to ranking and search. That's a whole other thing. But when it comes to reviews, did not really seem to make much of a difference. So it's not something where you need to be, emailing people and telling them to click on specific reviews. Now, I do have a slide thing that I put out here if you want to pull it up. So it has like a checklist of the top things that you need to do. So that bit.ly URL will take you to like just a little cheat sheet if you weren't furious in taking notes. I haven't published any of this stuff yet, but it's in the works. So when we get it out and put it on our blog, it'll also go out through our newsletter, which is free if you want to get that. And yeah, we can open up for questions.
Okay, so let's give a big round of applause. I also want to highlight that this track is sponsored by Imaginuity. Imaginuity is an integrated marketing agency here in Dallas. They are focused on getting customers efficient conversions. I am personally a fan of their work because they transform my life 5 years ago when I entered digital marketing. So definitely encourage you to check them out. But with that, does anybody have any questions for Joy? Okay. This room is small enough, so I'm just going to point and you shout.
Okay. First off, super fascinating. Love all of it. There's two quick questions I have. Is like the staff upvoting reviews constitute some sort of fraud. They like our business. Is that considered some sort of fraud?
Not that I can think of. Like Google wouldn't do anything about it. They also wouldn't know it was your staff. I don't know if the IP address makes a difference, because when we were looking at these, like I'm assuming they were legitimately upvoted by like different customers. So I don't know if it would make the same impact if they were all coming from the same IP address. That could be something that Google looks at. But I don't think there would be any penalty in any way.
Okay. And the last one would be, for them to review, you mentioned like frequency, you need to keep reviews. Is there some sort of guideline you want to expect like a small business, like, hey, try to get 4 to 5 reviews a week, sort of like that?
Yeah, so we usually, it depends on like who their competitors are and how many reviews they have. So normally what I do is we use Places Scout as the tool. And they have a competitors tab where like it'll show you the top ranking competitors, how many reviews they have. It doesn't really tell you how recent the reviews are, which is kind of annoying, but I'll usually look at like some of the heavy hitters and just see like you can run those through the GMB Everywhere audits tool that I mentioned, that graph, and you can see their frequency, and I would try to be above them. Like whoever the top ranking business is, beat their frequency. So Places Scout is a paid tool. We use that for ranking. Like some of the ranking grids that I had was from there. And they have a competitors tab where you can see, like, you can sort it by top 3 rankings, and you can use organic or local pack rankings. Places Scout, yeah. And then the other one that's free is the GMB Everywhere audit. It's like a Chrome extension. And that's the one that does the graph that I showed that shows you, like, you can just put a single business in there and it'll tell you what the average rating was over time and how many reviews over time. And they just came out with another one that they posted on the local search forum. It's called, I think, GMB Alert, which I think is also like a freemium model. And they're using that one for all the review takedowns that Google's doing, because they have done some serious wipeouts in the last week and a half. So businesses are using that to get alerted if they lose reviews. GMB Alert, I believe. Yeah. There's a thread about it on the local search forum. It's like one of our top threads there, talking about Google reviews going missing in the last couple weeks. So there's a lot on that thread. It talks about the tool.
Companies like Shopper Approved, those, what effect, what's your opinion of those?
So most of if I'm following correctly, like they're for seller ratings and ads and stuff, right?
Well, they have different models. One of them we tried with Shopper Approved, and they'll put at the end of the enrollment pathway or the shopping cart, they'll query the user if they want to leave a review, and we've had some mixed results there. I was just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so we don't really work with a lot of e-commerce clients. So I know with e-commerce, there are probably better tools than the one we use. We use GatherUp for review soliciting. And then for ads, because seller ratings are really good if you run ads. And we use, I think it's called Verified Reviews, I believe, the company. And they get the seller ratings, and they can actually import Giggle reviews, which is awesome. So we use those.
Just a FYI, so Shopper Approved, they're a pretty big player than that, probably one of the top 2. And they said that their notice of patterns that occurred about 2 Novembers ago, was that Google, if you left less than a sentence, or a sentence or less, then you wouldn't shop. You have to leave at least a sentence period, the pause or something. And it turned out to be true in our case.
Yeah, no, longer reviews are definitely a bigger deal than people realize, for sure.
Just your thought on something. So I was in the New York City area where a friend of mine, his business, like a customer left a review that the business will close, and then Google marked his GMB like temporarily closed. But it's a business that, that has thousands of reviews, but, it's New York City, it's a storefront, like he has a gate. It can look to the untrained eye like it's not open, but one single review, someone just left a review and it was marked as closed. And I've seen that twice in like the last month. Is that something you've seen or heard of?
No, that's fascinating. It wouldn't surprise me. Google is trying so hard to automate things. So it wouldn't surprise me that they would automatically mark a business. It's a claimed business, I assume, right?
This is a claim business, and once I go in and I said, it took 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you didn't notice it immediately, or someone walked in the store and said, hey, why are you marked as closed?
Yeah.
I mean, I could send you like the screenshot, but it says temporary, not closed. There's permanently closed, but it was temporarily closed.
That's interesting. I haven't heard of that, but it doesn't surprise me at all. Like Google's, some of the things they've tried to automate have failed so miserably, but they still want to automate things. So they're still pushing in that direction. So good to have alerts set up. That's all I can say about that. Make sure you get those email alerts because you should get one if it updates.
But just to put in context with some of the things, like those reviews were really long. So maybe they just took it more serious because the person left a really long angry review because the business was closed.
And there's signals that we don't see too, so keep that in mind. They know if the person called the business or if they showed up at the location or whatever. So there's certain things that Google would have that would deem that review as more legit, right? So.
I'll check to see if the person's a local guy, but probably that has something to do with it. Thank you.
No problem.
Does the substance of the review matter? And I'll give you an example. So if you send out a survey asking your friends, et cetera, to go to Google, place a review, don't claim that you bought anything. It's not what it is. Just comment on the benefits of the website as you see it. Anything wrong with that?
So technically it's a violation of Google's terms because they actually, their review terms have changed over the years, but every time I ask them if they remove something from the public policy, I'm like, did it actually change? They say no. So that was one I brought up to them because it used to say in the guidelines that you had to have a customer experience. And I think they removed that sentence. So I remember asking Google about that. I'm like, did you change a rule or is that still true? And they're like, no, it's 100% still true. They just removed it. But the basic reasoning that I got from Google was a customer experience basically means the person had the intention to hire you. Doesn't mean they actually hired you. So for example, if somebody calls you, like, so that review, that negative review, we would never get that negative review removed if that person was trying to call my agency intending to hire us. Even if they never did, they still were intending to. So in Google's eyes, that would be a customer experience. But that would be not true of your friends, right?
But
Like,
if you again, are they looking aside from what technically is their rule? Are they looking for the substance of, hey, I bought something and it was great, or hey, this is an interesting, the benefits that they offer were interesting. Is there anything like in the substance?
I don't think they're that sophisticated yet, and they definitely can't automatically detect it. We see so many people reporting like, oh, their employees left these reviews, or like, it clearly states in the review that they weren't a customer. They're really bad at catching those. So if someone reports you, then they'll probably get removed, but you probably won't see too much of that.
Yeah, that's fuzzy line. Okay. Is there intent? You told them about it. Hey, this is neat.
And
maybe sign up.
yeah, this is where I'm like, again, I don't know what the FTC would, this would be a good question for Curtis Boyd if you're going to his session, but like, I know the FTC has guidelines, not that they enforce them, but like they do have guidelines for like what's an unfair business practice. I don't know where like friend reviews fall in there. I'm not sure.
Sorry if I missed the part where you covered this, but as far as the one old client, they asked to put a photo up. His review went up a little more, but it looked like a couple other ones did as well. Did you guys ever find any kind of reasoning or correlation for that, for them going up also, or is it just kind of an active reshuffling? How did that happen?
Yeah, Google clusters things. So we've noticed this, and this is true with the local search algorithm. Like sometimes if another business has a major impact, we'll see other ones get like clumped in as well. So I've seen cases where literally getting rid of the first listing in a 3-pack changes the entire order of the entire list. We've seen this time and time again. So I would assume that clustering effect happens with reviews as well. Whereas like, oh, if this is now the leader, then ones that are kind of similar to the leader would also get clustered in there. That's what I think happened with the reviews.
Interesting. Wow. Thanks.
In your study, did you look at owner review responses and owner review response length?
We did not. And that's one thing that I wish we had, because I was like, oh, I've been asked that question a few times. We've never seen any correlation with owner responses making any difference for ranking or for any of that stuff. But it's hard to measure too, because I'd have to find a business that had no owner responses to even like, and then have them add a bunch. So it's a really hard thing to measure. I would suggest doing it either way. Like I always tell people, respond to reviews because the person gets an email alert. So it's like a customer service thing. It's like you're basically thanking them for leaving your review.
Sorry, one more, actually two. When you said 10 reviews, you meant 10 total, is that what, or is it 10 over a period of time?
For,
The first comment.
oh, for ranking,
Yeah,
10 total.
total. And so then I didn't catch, you gave an example of a company that went like 6 months and kind of flatlined. I kind of missed the point. I apologize if you could just.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of like if you get to a certain level and then just stop, you're going to probably find your ranking will drop over time. So
Position ranking.
yeah, so like your rankings in the 3-pack. So we've seen that basically like having kind of a constant flow of reviews, it makes sense. Google might think that that business is like dying off or nobody likes it anymore. Like if you think about it practically, but it usually happens in conjunction with algorithm updates. So we see an algorithm update, and if like somebody does badly with an algorithm update, when we look at their reviews, that's a pattern we see often. They haven't had any new reviews in like 6 or 8 months. So they've lost that steam.
Is it only impacting though the position ranking in the 3-pack, or is
Yeah.
it outside of that? It doesn't have an impact on that?
Yeah, organic is like, as far as I can tell, reviews on your Google business profile have no impact on like your organic.
It's only on the 3-pack.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certain, like same with your business category or things, like whatever business category you put on your listing, that impacts where the listing ranks, but it wouldn't impact your website as a whole organically. 2 different beasts.
Okay, well, let's give another round of applause. We'll let y'all go, but you're still here for.
Oh yeah, I'll be here for, I just need to turn off this.